Hi, you all. Who are all of you? Hang on, I've never seen or met.
We can always start with introducing ourselves. We usually do that anyway, so we can go around. I'll start, I guess. So I'm Olivia.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Alex.
I'm Abby.
I'm Katie.
Gohar. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm studying psych, but I'm probably going to switch to screen, most likely, because I like it. I like it way more. Yeah, that's basically it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the first. All the students do both too. It's just hard to do it. You just have to be really careful, but students double major in psych and screen all the time.
I'm planning on majoring in media culture and the arts.
Nice. Are you in the library right now?
No, I'm in my room. My desk is just in a weird spot.
Okay.
Yeah, and I am also going to be majoring in either MCA or screen studies. I haven't quite decided, but I'm probably going to minor in something like sociology, but yeah.
I don't know what I'm gonna study yet. It's probably the plan when I got here was either sociology or music. But I might switch it to film or some sort of art. I'm really at a loss. We'll see.
Well, I was an English major all the way until my PhD, and I went to do my PhD in English, and I took one film course, switched. So, you have time.
I've got time. That's all I need to know.
Yeah, you got plenty of time. I'm Gohar Siddiqui. I am professor in screen studies. Please call me Gohar. Go by she, her, hers. What else? That's cool. Yeah. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But yeah. All right. So how have you been doing these discussions?
So usually we go into them with just a couple talking points. This one we were a little nervous because melodramas are way different than any of the other dramas we've been doing or genres we've been doing. So we'll probably just go through each person and whoever has a point they want to discuss can do that, if that sounds good.
Sure.
All right, great.
I'm just a participant. I'm gonna try really hard not to teach, so I'm gonna step back and just jump in whenever.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, let's see. So one of the biggest points, basically we can talk about how it's a melodrama. One of the things I thought was interesting that we kind of mentioned in some of our talks with Hugh was that these are kind of based around the characters, and the actors, if that makes sense. So the characters they chose, the way they acted, that determined kind of how much of a melodrama it was. So the woman, I always forget the actress's name, but she was so dramatic in the way she spoke, more than anyone else. I don't know, but that definitely made it a melodrama for me. If she was way more, I don't know, normal, it talks we're talking to each other, it wouldn't make sense.
So. It was just she was channeling those old Hollywood actresses. When we were watching the films that Hugh had us watch in class, it's she was doing an impersonation of that really famous actress. What's her name? Jodie? No, that's wrong. Joan Crawford. Yeah. It was she was channeling her inner Joan Crawford.
Yeah, and I just looked up the cast just for reference. So Julie Ann Moore was the actress. Her name in the movie was Kathy, just so to refresh the memory. But I thought that what was interesting is that she didn't really seem overall out of all the characters the most melodramatic. I felt like Frank was her husband.
Yeah, Frank was definitely the most dramatic. That scene where he was drunk on the couch and he was just screaming and oh my god.
I was you're a horrible person. First off, you cheated on your wife and you're upset with yourself, which is understandable because of the society at that time. But you you're taking it out on her. She's being nothing but nice, and then you hit her, and it's just like it just when he heard about Raymond, he was so upset. I got so upset at him because I was like, there is no way that you're getting away with this. That's just so not fair.
Oh my god, yeah. And when we were watching the film, I literally jumped out of my seat like at that part. I was like, oh my god.
So upset.
He did not.
Like, come on, like, be a decent human being. So awful. And nothing even happened. It's like
Literally, no. He was just being dramatic.
melodramatic. That's what he was being.
Melodramatic. Make
Yeah,
drama out of the littlest things.
I think what Abby was saying about like her heated not reaction, I think that's like a very that's like a staple in like melodramas, is that you have those moments where you're like, no way that that person's acting like that. So that's like a way that they really rely on the characters to create drama. And obviously like the whole thing, we can all tell it's a melodrama, but the one part where someone was being so over the top that I was like, okay, yeah, this is obviously a melodrama, was when Kathy went to like that art show, and then I think it was like her friend was like, this is my uncle, and he was just like the most stereotypical like rich guy ever. Like it was just such over the top acting, like with like the way he talked and everything, and like just like down to his look. It was like
Right down to the costuming. He had like the little neck scarf.
But he's coded as gay.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So the excess in everyone is sort of indicating something that is not present verbally in this world.
Yeah.
Right? So melodrama or the melodramatic excess in their gestures or their acting, etc., is what cannot be conveyed through just plot, what cannot be conveyed through, like it kind of exceeds language somewhere, right? Like you're absolutely right. Okay, melodrama is my jam. Okay, so I'm gonna talk a lot about it. It's hard to talk about though, right?
Very.
Yeah, it's like it's more just like the implications it gives.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like you have to study the body language and just like how the film presents itself to even, I guess, like understand the melodrama. It's like what's not said.
Exactly.
It's so hard. Like, I mean, with the Joan Crawford clip, that was the definition of melodrama. I don't know if you guys have watched like a lot of movies from back then, but when my grandma stays with us, she always has Turner Classics on, and so those are always on. And it's just like such a typical thing. Sometimes it's like a copy and paste, just those scenes. Because it was just like, you have no idea what they're talking about. You don't need to. You just need to know what's like, that they're being dramatic.
But, which one of you said it was like an impersonation of Joan Crawford? Abby, you said that, right? So do you think that's deliberate?
I think so, because like the film was made in 2002, and I think it was meant to like impersonate a film that was like made back in the 50s. I think like aesthetically it did that on purpose.
Right. And you also watched did you watch a clip from any Cirque film? I think you did, right?
Yeah, in class we watched a scene from the film that it was based on. I think it was called like
All That Heaven Allows.
All That Heaven Allows. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. So because it's like Haynes is very much, I think this film is an homage to Cirque, very much so. But before going there, I wanted to ask, like, you're talking about melodrama and how things are melodramatic. How do you understand melodrama? Like, how have you talked about it?
I think one big thing Professor Manning said was that like normally you want to like avoid cliches in film, but melodrama is all about like embracing the cliches. Like, so I remember while we were watching a movie, like the second Kathy and Raymond started talking, we were all like, yeah, something romantic's gonna happen there. So like we all knew it, but then like we were all kind of also cheering for it to happen. Like normally I feel like if a movie does something really obvious, you kind of like roll your eyes at it and you're like, you could have been a bit more creative with the plot.
Yeah.
But like in melodrama, you like want the cliches to happen. So like when Kathy and Raymond were clearly like kind of getting romantically involved, everyone was like, even though we knew it was going to happen, like we were happy it was happening.
Right. So because to me, this film is like a melodrama and somehow not as much
Yeah.
as melodramatic as like Cirque was. But you're all hitting all the points. So I remember taking a graduate class where the professor was like, you need to talk about melodrama in 3 ways, otherwise you will never be able to grasp it. And he said that you need to think about it as a genre, like as like the women's melodrama, the women's weepies, like the Joan Crawford movies that Katie you were talking about, right? The fallen woman, who like in this case I think she's the in some ways the fallen woman because she falls in love with the wrong man, right? And then she gets punished for it at the end. Or so, and it's like a the the excess is in like the affect, right? There's a lot of pathos. So the woman usually cries a lot. These are domestic melodramas, right? It's a subset of melodrama. The woman cries a lot, and then the audience is supposed to like identify, and then they also like, you know, so there's like a mirroring of that kind of emotion. But then there's also what Cirque does is melodrama as style, which is that it gets um, what's the word, like expressed through like the mise en scène, through music, through gesture, through acting, right? Like this film is saturated, like you hit pause at any moment of time and you see like the colors. You can just do like a close analysis of just every single frame through that, right? And all of that is expressing a lot that is verbally not expressed, like what you just mentioned, right? And then the third is melodrama as mode, which is supposed to like permeate throughout. So like you're talking about romance films, right? Like, you know, like the cliche of romance, which is not as such part of every single melodrama as genre, right? But it is part of the melodramatic kind of mode that you see. And in the domestic sphere, there's always all of these contradictions that get raised up in melodrama that the ending tries to kind of neutralize, right? So at the surface level, everything looks perfect in the domestic household, but then you see deeper and nothing is good, right? There are these contradictions. You have these issues of race and sexuality. And usually the ending of melodrama sort of is a happy ending, right? Or it tries to paper over those contradictions, but the ending seems false because of that, right? So they're also often known as false endings, even if they are happy. And this film did not give us that ending at all, right? So that's why I'm like, oh, it's not like there is a lot of pathos. So we are constantly like thinking of it at the level of style and like intellectually, like it's requiring us to think, right? But at the same time, there are these moments of feeling. So we are both like reading and feeling, or interpreting and feeling at the same time, as opposed to the two being like two up. You know, like how genres. You read the body genres article, right? So like the body genres are seen as ones that are more sentimental, more about affect, and not about thinking so much. But that's not the case here.
Yeah.
I
And I
promised
think
lecture and I did. I'll stop. Yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
I think one other way, as you were saying, like this is a melodrama, but it's also not. Another thing, and maybe I just missed it, was that I didn't notice like the music being as exaggerated as I expected it to be in this.
Yeah,
Like I feel like a lot of the tension in the scenes were just able to come from like the characters' interaction, and I didn't notice like the super over the top suspenseful like music that I've seen backing like more classical melodramas.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely like heard a lot of music that related to those kind of like old melodramas. I don't know if I'm just completely making this up, but I feel like because there was so much more technology now, or when it was made, like in 2002, and they just have so many more techniques and the picture's clearer. They don't really need to act out as much, and they don't need as much of like, okay, this is what's happening, because they're also, this sounds so rude, but this, I don't mean it to. I feel like back then they weren't really showing this a film for a well-educated audience. I feel like now this film was made for a more educated audience. Like you're not supposed to, like you're supposed to point out, oh my gosh, that's like so racist, that's like absolutely prejudice. Back then, I feel like that was just a part of life. They wouldn't really point it out as much. And if they did, it would be a big deal.
Let me. I don't. Okay, so it's not that the audience was not educated. Actually, the films were more complex narratively because of the code. A lot could not be shown, right? So they couldn't show sexuality in the way in which this did, or the racial issues in the way that this one did. So a lot of it actually went into really complex mise-en-scène. So it actually required audience to be like smarter in some ways because everything is not transparent, right? But that has to do with codes of representation, right? Even now, there are things because of censorship or because of rating that Hollywood does not show, right? So they will censor out certain parts of films from international films that get shown here. So that is different from how we think about what, so there is not an equivalent in relationship between what the film is showing and what the audience is. Does that make sense? And Cirque, you should watch Cirque films. I also wanted to say, Alex, I'm not saying that this film is not a melodrama. What I'm saying is that this film is actually pointing to what all melodramas do, right? The ending we can talk about, but all melodramas sort of force you to go both ways. But I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. It's like an homage to the like whole genre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like I thought that was really interesting too, that like you kept on bringing up mise-en-scène, because there's this one scene in the film that I like am still thinking about. It's when Kathy was like driving in the car, and you could definitely tell that it was shot on set and not in like an actual car.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was interesting because like in 2002 they definitely have the ability to shoot in an actual car. Like they have the ability to put the camera on the hood of the car or like in the car and do that. They don't have to like lug around all this bulky equipment necessarily. And but they still made the like active decision to shoot it on set. And so I thought that like when I was watching it, I was like, oh, that's definitely like a nod towards the genre and how like a lot of the films, like melodrama films, were shot on a set.
Yeah.
And yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
And it connects to a little bit to what Katie said about educated audience. It's about an audience educated in melodrama, right? It's about cinephile. This film is for cinephiles. It's people who love film. So you noticing these things, this is bringing like this added layer of joy to someone, right? Even the tint of the colors, right? Like the surface becomes so important as well.
I agree. And also because like going off what Abby said, it's kind of like the director wanted to experiment in making it like a melodrama while making it different. So like the car scene you're saying, also it was so saturated, but like in a fun way, where you noticed it. And I thought that was kind of like interesting. And then when like a more sad scene happened or something where there was like tension, it was obviously bluer. And I thought like that was also kind of cool. But also one way it was different was that he was talking about how like most melodramas or all melodramas are basically like the woman is in distress or like it's stereotypical. But this one I felt like Frank was the one that was like constantly in distress, and I thought that made it so much more different than other ones, and she was kind of like the strong one, I guess.
Oh my god, yes. And then at the end of the film, so it's supposed to like be an homage to, it's like based on a previous film, and like we watched the ending scene in class where it was like she leaves because she can't do it to the kids or whatever. She can't be with the man who is not in her world. She can't do it. She's making the active choice to leave. But at the end of this film, it's Raymond who chooses to leave. And so I thought that was interesting. It was like a reverse of what happened in the original film that it was based on.
Wait, did you watch the very last scene of All That Heaven Allows?
Yes, I think so. I think
the one with the deer?
Yes.
Ooh, I didn't know that. I was like, I don't know if I can make you watch that scene. Can we talk about these two scenes, the last scene of this and the last scene of that one?
Yes. Also,
Absolutely.
wait, I just add one quick thing. I probably shouldn't have said uneducated. What I meant was like more ignorant or just unaccepting. Like it's like, yeah, the codes too, but it's just the audience they wouldn't handle it. It would be so different. Like these are things that are talked about now.
No,
Back
no, no,
then,
I figured what you were saying,
yeah,
and that's why
I
I
just
clarified.
thought to clarify it.
No,
Just to,
the audience was not ignorant. It just wasn't. So, like, because do you know what the code? Did you talk about the code in your class? Okay, so there was the PCA, the Production Code Administration, and there were things you could show in films, there were things you could not, and the code was established by the major studios and minor. I'm trying to remember everything. Hang on. Yeah, so it was like a self-censorship in some ways, right? So these studios, so that they would not get outside interference. So there were things they would not show in films. So there were things like if a woman and a man were in the same room, the woman's, like, at least one of her feet needed to be on the floor. If there was a bed, like both of her feet could not be up, so there were all of these things. There were films about race. Actually, Cirque made a film about race, about a woman and her mate. So like Sybil and what's her name, Kathy, Julianne Moore's name, right? So that kind of reminds me of Imitation of Life, which was a 1933-34 film, which was remade by Cirque again in the 1950s. But again, right, so it's like you have these two melodramas going on in the film, the melodrama of the white woman and the melodrama of the black woman, right? So there was, to an extent, race was represented. But integration did not happen, right? They could not imagine a lot of these kind of things in melodrama of that time, in the 30s particularly, right? So in terms of the romantic relationship, right, between the couple, and then when we talk about sex, so there are films where I'm blanking on the name of the film, but the Jewish character is actually coded as gay. Or in one of the films, I think it's a film with Clark Gable and Joan Crawford. The director of the Joan Crawford is the dancer, but the director of the show, right? He's coded as gay, but they are never out as gay, right? Or the Jewish person is coded as gay, but right. So the issue of anti-Semitism is played out, but never really homosexuality or homophobia. So that's about other things rather than the audience. That's what I was trying to say, right? So yes, there is homophobia, etc. There were these treatments being done. So there were reasons why. So Katie, you're pointing to something that could not be shown then, which Todd Haynes is showing, right? It doesn't mean that these things did not exist then, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it was just like it was just accepted differently. It wasn't like, like you said about the code legally, like, which shows a lot, reflects a lot about how much the society could actually handle something like that. It was just not talked about as much.
No, because it was about what would be popular. So think about films right now. How many films do we see with queer characters? Very few, right? It's about profit. It's about capitalism. It's about making money. So it is about the public, but it is not about what the actual public thinks, but how the filmmakers or the studios are imagining what would sell, right? So when you think about it that way, then dominant ideologies are the ones which sell the most, right? So yeah. And Haynes is like a gay filmmaker. He's still not mainstream, right? Todd Haynes making this film, he's still not mainstream. So so you're actually pointing to something which is, you are getting to some of it, but it is like really complex how we think about audiences. And maybe instead of thinking of audience, we need to think about it in terms of audience fictions, which is how a filmmaker imagines their audience to be, right? So in some ways it becomes like, it's not necessarily, oh, the audience would not know or audience wouldn't accept, rather how the filmmaker then shapes audiences' expectations and how the filmmaker shapes their desires as well, or the studios rather, because the studios are the ones which are profit profit motivated, right? Not the directors. The directors are trying to, and that's why the directors are using these complex coding systems to introduce these ideas, which is why it requires like the sharp audience member to kind of be able to undo all of these codes and see, oh, this person is supposed to be gay, right? And all that heaven allows, that last scene, right? Rock Hudson was gay. So the guy, like, he's castrated, right? The woman, it's this happy ending with the deer too. Like, one, he's almost castrated. This woman is like a mother standing next to him. But then he was, like, we found out much later, he was gay. And then melodramas had this huge queer following even then. Have you ever tried just going on? Does it cut you off?
So yeah, it ends the Zoom, I think.
Huh. Okay.
And which is so weird because like it now, of course, that everybody's using Zoom, they found a way to make people pay for it. So it's just like, yeah, it's weird. It's a really
That
weird.
was not the case in the beginning when Zoom started, because it would
Yeah.
automatically,
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I think they just did it because they're like, we could profit off this because capitalism is evil.
Okay.
Okay. I wanted to ask, because Hugh, I don't know if he mentioned that in Unteachable Films that I was at, or in our last class, but he just mentioned the deer and how important it was, and I just didn't click for me. Like, I don't know what it means.
Well, every single time I've watched that film, the deer comes and I laugh. And it's not just me, everyone in the room laughs. You didn't watch the whole film, right? But the deer is so patently fake and false to me. I mean, I don't know what your interpretations are. That's the, like, quintessential false ending of melodrama. That it's a happy ending, but it's not really a happy ending, you know? Kind of a thing. To me, that's what it is. I don't know. What did you think of it?
No, that makes total sense. I didn't know if it was like a metaphor or something, or I didn't know, but that makes total sense. Okay, one of the things I wrote down was that, like, I'm not a huge fan of melodrama, so, like, I don't know, like, I know Abby really likes it. I think Katie really likes it too, it sounded like. So I thought, like, one of my biggest pet peeves was that, like, I knew how it was going to end. As soon as, like, I knew the two main problems, that he was gay and that she, like, looked at her black gardener, I was like, oh, there we go. So, so maybe that's just, like, all melodramas. That's just, like, the fun thing about it, but I don't know.
Yeah, like we were talking about earlier, it's like a big thing of melodramas is how they kind of embrace cliche. So I also like the film, and, like, I agree with you that pretty much the instant you know the problems, you're like, yeah, this is how it's gonna go. But I don't know. I guess I can't exactly put it into words, but, like, the film's just really good at making you get involved with the characters. And the way I see it, as it's like, since you know what's gonna happen, it's like you know what to root for, I guess. So, like, every time something happened between Raymond and Kathy that was, like, romantic, that was, like, it's like a victory kind of, because you knew it was going to happen, you're waiting for it to happen, so it's like you kind of get satisfaction from it. And then every time, like, Frank did something kind of bad, or, like, you saw his struggle, like, that's like a gasp moment, I guess. It's like you saw it coming, but at the same time you're like, no way he's going to do that or something.
Yeah, it was really funny because Katie and I were just, like, yelling at the screen the whole time, like, no, don't do that, go over there. But, like, we knew what the outcome would be ahead of time, but it still, like, got us just so riled up when it would actually happen. And, like, we knew that these surprises were going to happen. Like, we knew that the husband, Frank, was going to, like, sleep with the guy in Miami, but, like, when it actually happened, we were like, oh, how could he? Like, it's melodrama is very good at, like, getting you involved with what's going on in the plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's just like what Hugh said. He was like, the whole point of a melodrama is to make you cry at some point. I don't know if anyone else felt this way. I just could be an overly emotional person. But the scene where she goes to his house, to Raymond's house, and they meet out back and they talk, he's basically saying, we can't be together. I was like, this is so depressing. Like, I feel like I want to cry. It's like that. Then I was like, okay, yeah, this is a melodrama because of that. It was just, you knew it was going to tug at heartstrings.
Well, for me, Olivia, you're right. Like, it's like, how things are gonna happen. So for me, I'm talking about as a fan, not as an academic, right? For me, it's about how it gets shown, right? So then I'm actually going in for the excess. I'm like, oh, let me see how it's gonna go, right? Like the pool scene where that little black kid puts his foot in and all the women like get their children out of it. It is excessive, right? But it doesn't let you get away with like any doubt as to, it's so transparent and in your face in some of those moments. And for me, that moment where like it becomes so heartfelt is the very last scene where the train, like after he's on the train and the train goes this way, right? The train goes left of the screen this way, so it's kind of going forward, and Julianne Moore is just like there in the background. It's almost like she's stuck in the same place, right? All the others kind of move forward and she's stuck in the same place. And that is like such a moment of pathos for me. And it's beautiful. Like the colors are beautiful. Like the way the train goes is beautiful. It's like I can watch and rewatch that scene multiple times. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that there's just something so appealing of the like genre because there's like comfort in knowing what's going to happen, but also like how it's you don't know how it's going to be executed, but you do know like it's going to happen. And so that's why I think it's like the genre is so appealing to people, because it's like it's comforting, I guess. You're not like stressed out necessarily when you watch it. I mean, I guess I mean I was a little stressed out because I was like, what's going to happen next? Oh my God. But it's just like when you hear about people who like rewatch TV shows because they like to go back, they feel comforted when they rewatch it. And I think that's why people like melodrama so much, because it's like it's comforting.
But don't you think that's the same for any genre? Like all genres have formulas, they have that kind of predictability. That's the familiarity with the genre is the comfort or the pleasure part of it, right? And then
Yeah.
the newness is what you're looking for, like where do they change the plot twist, kind of a thing. Is that right? So for this film, actually the fact that it doesn't end like usually melodramas do, to an extent, right? I like Olivia, like you, I was like, there's no way they can be together, but I kept wanting them to be together at the end. I'm like,
Oh yeah.
happen. She's going to the train station. Maybe Haynes will, knowing Haynes too, and I'm like, maybe they will be together. And I still do that even though I've watched the film. But like it kind of gets to those desires, like melodrama, like the fact that like there are two things in melodrama, right? It's either like tears happen because you were too late, right? Or the person was too, like something happened which was too late, or something that happened just in the nick of time, like, so just they're not going to be together, and then she gets to the train station and maybe they'll be together, so both of those things kind of tug at your heartstrings and keep you kind of occupied in there.
Yeah, it's almost like a modern day tragedy, like when they end badly. Like the whole formula to like those ancient tragedies is that something happens too late at too high of a cost. And that's sort of like what I get from melodrama.
Yeah, I agree. Did anyone, okay, this may just have been me, but did anyone think that when she got there, she was just gonna get on the train and go with him? I didn't think that like the happy ending would be he would stay. I thought the happy ending would be she'd get on and they'd start a new life together, and that would be that.
With her kids in the car?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about the kids, but
But even if she took her kids with her, that was like one of the, like, it was horrible, but that was one of my favorite parts, was that he kind of was like, this is going to happen wherever we go. Like, wherever we go, even if we aren't known when we get there, like, interracial marriage and, like, living together will still be looked at badly. So like it was so sad that like no matter what they did, they still would not feel like socially allowed to be together. So
Because that's what melodrama does, right? It exposes the real conditions, right? It exposes how problematic, for example, patriarchy is, right? And because it's usually in the domestic sphere, right? So it showcases social conflicts within like the familial unit, for example, right? And here you do have that, and they are supposed to be, because gender is such a key factor. So it's women, it's about bourgeois life, but here it does that in terms of race and sexuality. So like everything you're saying about Frank is so on point, because in melodrama, the like someone's status as a hero is very much directed through suffering, right? Through masochism. This is the person who suffers the most. So who are the people suffering? Frank is suffering. And he kind of gets a happy ending, but not really. It's temporary, right? He's gonna be, because what it has done, what the film has done is, what the melodrama has done is, it's like taken away all of this veneer. So at some level, the film is just about surfaces and how everything looks perfect on surface. But then it's also like you take away the surface and everything is like deeply tragic, right? And what is tragic is something fundamental and systemic. It's not just an individual. So whether it's about race, right? Olivia, you're talking about like, it's not gonna get better. It's like his life is more destroyed than Julianne Moore's is by her meeting him, right?
exactly. And also like I even thought that it was interesting how the film kind of showed how even her being a woman like screwed her over even more, because Frank was able to leave the kids. Like he was able to like say, well, you know, sorry, I'm gonna go, even though he has to live in secret and that's gonna be horrible. He doesn't even know that she's like not allowed to love the person she loves, but he's like, he doesn't have to deal with the children. She's gonna have to, you know, have like, they're gonna grow up without a father, and that doesn't matter because he's a man, and like it just, you know, he doesn't need to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Like the ways in which it kind of it, you're absolutely right. The ways in which Frank is oppressed, right? And Kathy is oppressed, and they're two different, and how one's oppression kind of affects the other one's. Like all of this is working. It doesn't create this comparison where you're like, oh, he's gonna be so happy, right? Even like, you're absolutely right, Olivia. I'm not saying that you're not right. He's gonna be so happy, but at the same time, he does have um he does have privilege as this white guy, this white rich guy rather, right? And she doesn't. So like what you're saying reminds me of like when she's hit, like anyone who knows immediately that she has been hit by him, all they can do is offer condolences. No one does anything, and that points to like what was going on, right? There are ways in which women's lives were completely kind of dependent on the men, and like domestic abuse, big deal. You deal with it, right?
Well, I think just over the course of this, like the big thing I've realized that this movie does is it pays homage to the whole genre of artifice, but like not the whole genre of melodrama, but it like removes the artifice. So like it's doing everything a melodrama does, but it's not hiding the things that like only the informed viewer would have gotten in the 50s. So like it's displaying like homosexuality and like the problems that oppressed people go through, which melodramas did in the 1950s. They just had to hide it because of the codes and because of capitalism and everything. So like, while this movie is on the surface, it's like, it's paying homage, but in like plot points, it's like almost radically different from melodramas just in like what it can do. Like, but like melodramas back then were still doing it. They were just hiding it. But now like this movie just doesn't hide that. And it's still fully a melodrama, but like it's just not hiding the things that melodramas used to have to hide.
When you started with artifice, I was like, this film is totally artificial. It is paying homage through being artificial. And then I was like, oh, you were saying something else.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, this was just like on my mind, but the music, I actually really enjoyed the music because that was the first thing I noticed. Even as soon as it starts, like you hear the music and it's this big orchestral like music that's just, and it's playing over this mom driving into her driveway. It's like, you know, it wouldn't make sense in any other genre. And then I just loved how like the music was what determined the mood. Like the score was what you like, it grew more intense right before something happened. Like when she was smacked, it was supposed to be, you know, dramatic, but the music made it so much more, like so much better. I don't know if anybody else wants to like talk about that, but I love that. That was my favorite part.
Yeah, I guess the music wasn't like the first thing I noticed. The first thing I noticed was definitely like the whole mise en scène. Like I just noticed how like artificial it looked. I think one of the first things I said about the film was like, oh, I bet they're in New England. Just because like the way it looked. I was like, maybe it's New Hampshire, maybe it's Connecticut, and I just kept on like naming off places like where it could be. And then like I eventually found out it was Hartford, but like the whole look and feel of the film just adds more like depth to it, I think. And as it's same with the music, like the music is just like a whole different part of it. Like if we were missing one of those things, the mise en scène or the music, it just wouldn't be the same film it is. And I think they just like build off of each other.
Yeah, I don't know if I feel like the 40s and 50s there were a lot of these melodramas just with happy endings. Just they said I looked it up once, and I think it was Wikipedia, something said that the reason they were so popular at the time is because everyone was just trying to ignore the war or all the other things that were happening. Everyone was just in denial, and this was a way to escape, to think that this is what life is like. The glamorous, like gorgeous house, glamorous clothes, perfect family, perfect home life, just kind of that. And I feel like that this kind of breaks that, which doesn't make it a melodrama. Also, since she's not the one who's being melodramatic and it's Frank, doesn't that kind of make it, forgot what he called it. Started with an N, but I don't want to say it wrong, so I'm not going to try to say it.
But wait, who said it?
Hugh.
Yeah, he explained it was like a specific word that basically was like the woman is always dramatic. I'm trying to find it in my notes.
I can look it up, but he said it was like the male version of a melodrama, because a melodrama is when a female is like being melodramatic.
But do you think Kathy has no melodramatic moments? I think she does.
I think she does, but I think that he's mainly the more melodramatic character. I think that that's what kind of, I feel like in melodramas there's, you know, it's usually the woman who's like over the top and the male's just kind of like sitting there taking it all in calmly. Yeah. But it was mostly the other way around in this. But I still think that they all play a part in being melodramatic. It's just Frank was absolutely the melodramatic character in this movie.
Emotionally overwrought.
Yeah, he was just like irrational, just freaking out over the smallest things because of his own issues. And it was just, she was calm during those harsh scenes, actually. Like when he hit her, she was very calm, and I was shocked. I was expecting her to like start crying and having this whole melodramatic scene, but she didn't. She just kind of held herself together and said, it's okay, I'm fine. Just really calmly.
You're right. And I'm like, you are so right. And I'm like rejudging what I was thinking about that scene, because I'm judging myself for having thought that in some ways, because to me, her behavior was so much about how she is supposed to be as this 50s housewife and not show any emotion. And the place where we see her emotion is when when she's crying and Raymond kind of sees her crying, right? That's when she's out of control. Or I see her as melodramatic in moments where the camera kind of just catches her and it's just her, right? Her face in close up. But it's not when she's being emotional. It's just it's the close up of the face as opposed to her acting out the way Frank does act out. So Katie, you're absolutely right. Like Frank is, and in that scene, I keep thinking of her as a type as opposed to a person, and therefore she becomes more melodramatic for me in those moments. But I wonder, like, those are the moments where, like, I read some review where Frank was supposed to be like, oh look, Haynes found the most straight male kind of gay person here, right? In how Dennis Quaid plays it, and I'm like, no, because yes, in some ways, if you think of him as the person who hits his wife, who doesn't care, who is like he's the one who gets angry about her, about race, when like if his secret comes out, there's gonna be a problem too. So there's this hypocrisy in there, even though it is tragic at the same time, right? But then there are these moments where he is absolutely the affective or affect producing, pathos producing, emotional, completely out of control person, right? And drunk too. So he's actually like insensate, like he's not in control of his senses even.
Absolutely, exactly. I think like it's interesting that it kind of shows his psyche of like he's dealing with all these most likely mental health issues on top of, because he has to be forced to go get help for his sexuality. That's so like that's unnatural. That, you know, so he has to try to like, he's just fighting two sides of himself, and that's just something like you would expect to see in a woman, like she's dealing with being sad or being upset, but instead she has to be like the strong one and kind of watch it happen. But yeah, I totally agree. If nobody else has any points, I think we're probably past our time, but like that's fine. Gohar, do you have anything?
I have a shit ton of stuff, but I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this. I've been swearing all this time.
Oh, I swear in all of them. It's okay.
Yeah, we are always swearing.
No, I think like no. The only thing I had to talk about was like the thing that I love about this film is its absolute cinephilia. But I think we did talk about it. It's not like we didn't, right? And for me, it's also about time. Like you were talking about artifice, like the opening scene where it's like a painting of the tree, and then it converts into an actual tree, which becomes alive. So it's like you're in the present. It's liveness as opposed to artifice, except that it is so glossy that you know it is still artificial. So you're watching the film for mise en scène, for sound, right? Olivia, we were talking about sound and the music, and for gestures, and for like everything that melodrama is very much draws attention to film as film. But at the same time, it's also like this homage to Cirque. So anyone in the know is kind of reading it in terms of Cirque too. And so I keep thinking about this, about this idea of time and nostalgia, right? So it's the present looking back to the past. It's an homage to the past, but there's also nostalgia. So like just that was just one more thing for me. And like you didn't watch. So for me, a lot of it is because I've watched All That Heaven Allows way more times than I've watched Far From Heaven. Like the TV and the Mr. and Mrs. Magnetic, like all of that stuff. Like the TV, the perfect gift for the 50s housewife, because she's supposed to stay at home and she should kind of, and that's what is left for her, right? To entertain herself at the end, like the TV at home. Like those are just like, so for me, it's like those scenes and those moments that are particularly amazing. But we are out of time and we should stop.
No, that was like a really, really interesting and fun discussion. I don't know about you guys, but I really enjoyed that. And I think we definitely learned new things like from you. So thank you.
I learned from you. I'm like, oh my God, I watched this all wrong. Like Katie just told me how to read this scene. I did it wrong. Oh my God. It's amazing. Doesn't matter how many times you watch a film, you talk to students and I'm like, oh, I never thought of it this way. But yeah.
And that's the best part. Like, I actually, even though I didn't love the movie at first, I do want to watch it again just because of like what you talked about and what like everybody mentioned. So that was very fun. So
It gets better on second viewing.
exactly. Yeah.
Because now it's not just you thinking you know what the ending is. You absolutely know, and you'll stop caring about that.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you to our guest for joining us.
Thank you for having
you.
me.
And yeah,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
bye.